thanks for joining me here at this coffee shop because it's been raining all day and we traversed that anyway. We want to talk about Jamestown and just different reads that we got while we were out there and how the energy, at least to me, was really surprising. Yeah, Jamestown settlement, the oldest colonial English settlement on the continent.
Yeah.
And yeah, the history's good. No, I mean it's bad. To know the history is good, that's what I mean.
It's good to have the foundational knowledge of what happened there and to have the awareness that we get to have added to the cultural awareness of the modern time.
That was so perfectly stated. Thank you.
I got you.
It was interesting driving in. I started to get like a clunk in my gut, and then I made a joke about dysentery. I should not have joked about dysentery. I thought it was irony. I thought it was a joke. It was not. That was me being clairsentient. Other thing we talked about was shades, and you were the first person. Other thing we talked about was
POV.
shades. Yeah. You mentioned it to me first, and I was like, oh yeah, that's what that wavy energy is.
It felt very, like, simple, and it's very recognizable because it's very much like not living.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Residual
haunting.
But even that has some cognizance behind it. I would say if we were looking at a frequency level, you've got like on the planes of us, so here's the earth. Wow, it is a sweet earth, you might say. You've got and so you're like, well, no. So if we're here, right, this is our plane, and ghosts sit kind of in the middle of that plane, and residuals sit lower, where this sat was below what I would constitute as a residual energy. Because they were just there. They weren't doing anything. They were just there.
Yeah. Well, wandering.
Some were wandering.
Some
Some were just kind of there. I saw a lot of people just standing around. I was like, all right.
Yeah.
It felt like holding space.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not really sure what they were holding space for, but there's just like space was needed to be filled. And so, like, this is where I stand.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just having a moment of like, I didn't talk to anybody there.
Part of it's like that. You remember in Pirates of the Caribbean when the longer you're on the ship, you become part of the ship. Mm-hmm. Part of the ship, part of the crew. That's kind of what it is. Yeah. Part of the land, part of the crew.
Mm-hmm. Though even the artifacts that are in the museum, we talked about, they didn't have a bunch of punchy energy.
No. That was the most sterile museum I've ever walked into in my entire life.
Historically interesting, spiritually sterile.
But a lot of as I was saying this earlier, a lot of the artifacts are not like, this is my favorite axe, this is my favorite pipe. This is stuff they just used and then threw away.
But that seemed to be like a personality trait across the board, where even when we were in the church and trying to get a read on somewhere where people are typically in an emotional state, there was just very bland.
I did catch some emotions in that space, crying and wailing and whys, but there was a lot of really bad things that happened in a very short amount of time that would constitute why that imprinted into the space, but otherwise it wasn't like people were in there going, why are you in my church? Or anything like that.
And it didn't feel so connected to the graveyard either. It was
very separated.
Yeah, and you mentioned they had moved the graves, or
the
however
graves
many
had been
times.
moved around,
Yeah. Some of them unmarked. Oh, something else in the church which kind of led to, like, otherworldly sorts of non-human entities. I did get the sense, sometimes to me, very large beings look like bulldogs. I'm trying to, like, deconstruct that. But, like, in the church, it almost felt like there's this big energy that just sort of sat in there. I've seen these before. Once was actually in my hometown, where it was like this big kind of energy that was slumbering and in a barn. And when I talk about big energy, like a story tall, maybe 2 stories tall. The thing is, though, the energy was so thin, it just sort of wasn't even doing, I didn't even think that I could talk to it. Maybe that was just me. I don't know.
I had seen the smaller dogs these, like, dog energy things that were out in the cemetery, just sort of almost sniffing or cleaning around. But that was, again, they didn't have a whole lot of purpose behind them, just sort of like, they do this thing and that's what they do.
That was in the terms of, like, otherworldly, like non-human, there were things that I would have expected that weren't there either. Like cleaners and maintainers, and I didn't even really feel land spirits. I didn't feel anything that I should. And I was just like, wow, I feel really cut off. Like, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing right now.
For so much, well, it's, okay, we can say so much history to have happened there, but I think it's because there's a tension being brought to that energy. When you look at other towns that maybe still exist, or greater things happened, or more people were there, this all goes back to the same thing that you were talking about with, it felt like a tool. Like, it's not my favorite axe, it's an axe that you use. Jamestown felt the same way. It was a settlement.
It felt like an establishing moment of just like sort of the everyday life that you see in a movie before you actually meet the main characters. And that feels weird because they were people and they were the main characters of their story, but there's just something about that time where it's like, this had to happen and they were fulfilling the role. And I think we're still unfolding some of what they established back then so that we could be more aware and fix a lot of stuff that I think over the last 1,000 years has been broken.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily walk in there and be like, oh yeah, this is haunted.
Yeah.
Those are not words that I would use at
It
all.
felt more like a museum.
A museum.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if the museum weren't there, the land would be a farm and be it. Oh, you talked about looking into why the energy feels so flush.
Yes. So where Jamestown settlement is, you have a swamp and then the river. And it's an anecdotal thing of running an errand and running into somebody saying, oh yeah, when high tide comes, it's going to flood. So I can't even imagine how many floods that small space has had over the last 100
flooded today.
Yeah, it did flood today.
Yeah.
It was flooding today.
They were going to close it at 3 because of high tide.
Yeah. They were like, oh yeah, it's too much rain. We got to close, high tide. I was like, oh, okay. So you've got cleansing that's happening periodically and just sweeping it all out and sweeping it all out and sweeping it all out. And then you have archaeological digs that are bringing up new items, which might awaken something that's just going to go, I used that pipe. Then it's gone again. Because there's so much contention between what was, what became, and what is now, it doesn't hold the same oomph that, say, like a consistently lived on, used, and manipulated place would be, like a haunted, like, hospital or a house.
It is unique from what you're saying that through archaeology, through understanding, through acknowledgement, that spirit is just released. Because there's certainly some archaeological spots, especially in regards to, like, bones, where things get stirred up and they come back, or they just stay there, or maybe something inhuman starts to arise and that kind of thing. But really, I was having kind of like the same moment. I had some clairsentient pings on, like, stomach problems. They had hunger as well as dysentery. But a lot of the other things, I was having the same moment of, can connect to items. But otherwise, I didn't talk to one dead person.
Not a soul.
Which is weird to say nowadays. Went to Jamestown settlement. No one's dead. Like, no one's dead there.
And there's also something to be said about the archaeological effort of how deep they have to go to find it.
Yeah.
So there could be a possibility of a reawakening at some point when they scratch enough of the surface. You've got glass paneling, which I definitely was like, oh my god, I almost thought I was falling into the floor, of foundations. And they have to dig pretty deep down to find that stuff. And I would only imagine how much buildup of sediment over time from floods and movement and things like that has happened. So there could be a resurgence. There's enough energy that goes into it. I would guarantee you that every school around here goes there for their field trips.
We saw some of them.
Yep.
So it's not like the energy isn't being repurposed back into the space. I just don't think there's enough of the space impacted by our current interventions to awaken it up enough to do anything about it.
Any other thoughts on there? I didn't feel like there was any work to be done either.
No.
Yeah, no, it felt very sort of almost undisturbed.
Strangely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it's really cool as intuitive people to be able to go somewhere and admit there's not a lot going on. I think that is a good integrity check to like not try to find too much where there isn't and to really stick to the truth of it.
As a clairtangent, I would give anything to be able to actually physically touch the walls under the glass, because I can't imagine like what kind of energy that might hold, if any.
Yeah.
But other than that, like if I'm not touching it, I can't really do much because energetically around me, I'm not feeling anything. So there's going to need to be some tangible for that to happen. I mean, I could mention that there was really only one thing in there that had any energy at all, and that was like the human beings that were in there. That was the only thing that had any kind of oomph, but even that oomph was like,
It was in time. Yeah.
all the other stuff is just trash.
Literal trash.
It's
Yeah.
literally like they found it in a
left
well
around.
that
Yeah.
they threw it in. It's
Yeah.
literally trash.
Yeah.
They didn't have that breastplate because they wanted to, and it was their favorite breastplate. They had it because they needed to make sure they didn't die.
And they did anyway.
And they did anyway.
Yeah. I mean, you make a good point. There was nothing there that seemed outside of the realm of necessity.
The only thing that seemed unnecessary was just some of the jewelry pieces and the beading. That was the only, like, if you want to be really technical about unnecessary. But a lot of you had, I think in the one part, there was a representation of how the indigenous peoples used to make their jewelry with using shells. But then you had the representation how the English used their beadwork to bring over to use for trade fodder, which that was the only thing that was like necessity, non-necessity at the same time.
Quartz arrowheads?
Yeah. Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were aware of how cool that was. but
That was pretty cool.
really
I feel they probably were, considering the connection to live with the earth instead of to conquer the earth.
Can you imagine? They're shooting them at people to cleanse them, dang it.
Cleanse you from this continent.
Gosh, I can't. You are cleansed. I can't even imagine.
What a considerate thing
Aggressive
to do.
cleansing
Yeah.
tactics.
Oh dear.
It was interesting, truly, in the experiences of going to like Williamsburg, which was
So
like
different.
it's such a little epicenter.
Yeah.
It's such a little like bustly town. Like everybody's still there just doing their thing.
Yeah.
And then you get all the way over here and it was just like, where did it go? Where did all of it go? That's actually, there's something else about this I need to mention, because this is coming from the paranormal investigator brain. There is enough imprinted trauma to cause a haunting to happen in that space. You had famine, you had like things that happened because of that famine, you had skirmishes, you had war, you had people dying, you had like some really major tragedy happening in one small space. That is the perfect recipe for an imprinted haunting, and it's not there.
I do wonder, the neutral energy we got from there, I wonder if they were traumatized before they got there. And so that's why their imprint wasn't necessarily there. Their imprints may actually be somewhere before there. And so we're just witnessing an already traumatized people existing.
It would not strike me as odd if there were a lot of people that came over who were like, this is going to be better than anything that I left when I left England. And then getting out, like surviving the ship,
Yeah.
seeing land, getting off the ship.
Well, it says something about somebody who is going to go to a place that nobody knows anything about. They were sold, I imagine, exaggerations, which were lies. The whole, go over there and get rich and all this stuff. Go over there and get dysentery. Like, that's really what happened.
And seeing the phases in which they were sent, too. It wasn't like, people coming in to create a new land. It was like, 40 men were sent, and then 40 women were sent. And then, so it was like this phased introduction of Europeans to this nation for a specific purpose that they were clearly given directions for, and they were following.
Yep. Settlement colonialism.
That was the funniest part of that day, other than the three groups of people coming together. And then they sent women. Really? They thought maybe that was a good idea. for housing and
They didn't
family.
think about that initially.
No, they did
Yeah.
not.
Bunch of dudes.
And it's like,
Yep.
and I'm likely writings went back. Like, we're dying here. They're like, it's all right. We'll send more people. No
Yeah, we'll
problem.
just procreate.
We'll fill,
Yeah,
we'll fill those
just
back
make
up.
more people.
Here's some women.
Capitalism will solve this.
Yeah, essentially that's what happened. Capitalism solved the problem.
Is tobacco.
Goes tobacco.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's
know.
it is a wild thing. That video at the very beginning was like America, you know.
I
like,
was detested
the founding-
right as we started. I was like, no.
And then
Yeah.
it's like, this is how it started in a swamp.
Yep.
That's so America though. Where did it start? In the trash. It started in the swamp.
It's like, there's a reason why indigenous people were not there. It's because it was a very bad spot of land.
I notice this very often in history as doing historical research for this place, that place, is that the way people come and pick like the most horrid spot to be like, yes, this is ours. And then the indigenous people will always be like, you sure about that? I mean, you can do that if you want to, but like, there's a reason we're not there. And then it floods, and then there's problems, and then there's illnesses, and yeah.
And then they get desperate and try to take what's not theirs from the indigenous people. Yeah.
because of their choices. Because of choices. This has been great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me over, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Cool.
I feel so validated.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on.
It only makes me curious.
Exploring.
I would actually love to go back, but I would love to go back with my S-Box and just listen.
Maybe on like a one day.
On a nice day in the summer?
Yeah.
that'd be good.
Yeah.
Even
would-
just this not rainy day.
Yeah, because this is persistent.
Yep.
I would love to see what might happen, given how it works. I'm wondering if there would be anything residual enough to directly communicate.
I don't think you get human.
I don't think
stuff.
I get
we
human
get,
either.
like,
That's why I'm so
elemental and
excited.
whatever. Yeah.
That's just the random noises that come
Yeah.
through. Great.
Bark, bark. Up. Maybe there's more ghosts of like horses, dogs, and animals and things like that.
That'd be interesting.
That would be interesting.
Or just in human stuff. Really
Yeah.
cool.
Like guardian energy would be
Yeah.
It can pick up on that stuff. We could definitely try that another time.
All right.
cool. Good job. Looking forward to it.
Good psychic stuff, everybody.
Yeah.
Yay!
Let's go get warm.
Yay!
We were looking for the hauntings. Didn't expect it to be in the. This is the recreation of things.
I am confused.